It brings indescribable sadness to know that the BBC's failures contributed significantly to her fear, paranoia, and isolation.
No one expected an ordinary maintenance project inside Kensington Palace to become the beginning of a story that would leave even Prince William struggling to find words. The work had been planned for months. A quiet section of the palace, used mostly for storage, was finally being cleared as part of a long-term effort to reorganize rooms that had accumulated decades of furniture, paperwork, and forgotten belongings.
A sensible democracy to have these sorts of debates.
It was the kind of task that rarely attracted attention, but this time was different. Late one afternoon, a member of the palace maintenance team noticed that one section of a built-in wooden cabinet appeared shallower than the rest. After removing several loose panels that looked as though they had not been touched for decades, the workers uncovered a narrow storage space hidden behind the wall. Resting inside was a single wooden box covered in a thin layer of dust. There was no official seal, no inventory tag, and no record attached to it. The box itself appeared surprisingly well preserved despite its age. Its brass hinges showed signs of wear, while the wood carried small scratches that suggested it had been moved many years before being carefully tucked away. Across the lid was a faded handwritten label that simply read, "For private storage." The workers immediately contacted the Palace Archives Department instead of attempting to open it themselves. That decision followed standard procedure. Royal residences contain thousands of historical objects, many of which require careful documentation before anyone is permitted to examine them. Every item discovered during renovations is treated with caution, especially when its origin cannot immediately be identified. Within an hour, senior archivists had arrived at the storage room. They carefully photographed the box from every angle before checking existing inventory records. What surprised everyone was not what they found, but what they did not. There was no record of the box anywhere. Every cabinet, cupboard, and storage room inside the palace had been logged during previous archival reviews. Yet this particular container appeared to have slipped completely through the system. One archivist quietly remarked that it almost looked as though someone had wanted the box to disappear without actually throwing it away. Nobody replied. Instead, the room grew noticeably quieter. Given the uncertainty surrounding its contents, the decision was made to notify Prince William. As someone deeply involved in preserving many aspects of his mother's charitable legacy, William had long shown an interest in historical material connected to Princess Diana. Over the years, he had supported exhibitions celebrating her humanitarian work, while speaking publicly about the importance of ensuring that future generations understood who she truly was beyond newspaper headlines. By early evening, William arrived at Kensington Palace accompanied by two trusted members of his private office. Those present later described him as calm, but naturally curious. At first glance, there was nothing remarkable about the wooden box. It looked like countless other archive containers that had passed through palace storage over the years. One of the archivists explained the situation. There is no catalog number, no ownership record, no transfer paperwork. William listened carefully before asking only one question. "Has anyone opened it?" The answer was no. He nodded. "Then let's do it properly." The box was carefully moved onto a large examination table beneath soft, archival lighting. Cotton gloves were distributed to everyone who would be handling the contents. Every step followed established preservation procedures designed to protect fragile historical materials. As one archivist slowly released the small brass catches, the lid lifted with a quiet creak. For a few moments, nobody spoke. Inside lay several neatly wrapped bundles covered in cream-colored tissue paper. They had been arranged with obvious care rather than simply packed away. Resting on top was an old leather-bound journal, its edges softened by years of handling. Beside it sat a collection of photographs tied together with faded blue ribbon. William reached for the journal first. He paused almost immediately. He recognized the handwriting on the inside cover. It belonged to his mother. Although countless examples of Princess Diana's handwriting have become publicly known over the years through letters, charity notes, and official correspondence, seeing it unexpectedly inside a forgotten storage box was something entirely different. The room remained silent. William gently turned another page before closing the journal again. He was not ready to read it yet. Beneath the journal rested several children's drawings created with colored pencils and crayons. Some featured smiling stick figures standing beside large trees. Others showed houses with bright yellow suns drawn overhead. On the back of one drawing appeared two names written in a child's handwriting: William Harry. A small smile briefly crossed William's face before fading almost as quickly. One archivist quietly noted that many parents preserve childhood drawings because they represent ordinary family moments rather than public occasions. It was an observation that seemed especially meaningful, considering how much of Diana's life had unfolded under constant public attention. As the contents were carefully removed one item at a time, the picture became increasingly personal. There were handwritten reminders folded into small squares. Shopping lists, charity notes, appointment cards. Several bundles of newspaper clippings carried handwritten remarks in the margins. Rather than commenting on public criticism, many of the notes simply recorded Diana's own reflections after charity visits. She had written reminders about people she hoped to contact again, hospitals she wanted to revisit, and children whose names she did not want to forget. These were not political documents. They were deeply human. They reflected someone trying to balance extraordinary public expectations with ordinary acts of compassion. Historical accounts have often described Diana's habit of making personal notes following engagements, particularly after visits to hospitals, hospices, and organizations supporting vulnerable families. While much of that material has remained private, former staff members have spoken over the years about her remarkable memory for individual people she met. William quietly examined several pages before placing them back exactly where they had been found. Further down inside the box sat 3 undeveloped rolls of camera film, sealed inside their original plastic containers. No one knew what photographs they might contain. Nearby rested a small velvet pouch. Inside was a sapphire brooch missing one small stone. It did not appear especially valuable compared with other royal jewelry, yet its obvious signs of wear suggested it had once been frequently used. Rather than sending it for repair, someone had carefully wrapped it in tissue paper before placing it inside the pouch. William studied it for several moments without saying anything. The discoveries continued. There were birthday cards, Christmas notes, several family photographs that appeared never to have been published. One picture showed Diana laughing while sitting on the grass beside 2 young boys whose faces were partly hidden by the angle of the photograph. Another captured an informal moment during what looked like a countryside picnic. Unlike carefully staged official portraits, these images felt relaxed and spontaneous. The atmosphere inside the room had changed completely. What had begun as an ordinary archive inspection now felt more like opening a forgotten family album. Then one archivist reached the very bottom of the box. There is something else. Resting beneath the final bundle was a cream envelope sealed, but otherwise untouched. Across the front, written in unmistakable handwriting, were 4 simple words. My dear William. No surname. No title. Just those words. William stared at the envelope without moving. For several seconds, nobody attempted to interrupt the silence. One archivist quietly asked whether the envelope should immediately be transferred into secure archival storage until its legal ownership could be confirmed. William slowly shook his head. I think my mother intended this to be read. No one challenged him. He carefully picked up the envelope, noticing that although the paper had yellowed slightly with age, the seal remained intact. Whatever had been written inside had stayed hidden for decades. Before opening it, William looked back toward the wooden box. Something still did not make sense. If these belongings genuinely belonged to Princess Diana, why had they never appeared in official archive records? Every significant collection associated with senior members of the royal family had historically been catalogued with extraordinary care. The absence of any paperwork seemed almost impossible. One senior archivist admitted the situation was deeply unusual. "In my experience," he said quietly, "boxes do not simply vanish inside royal archives. Someone had packed these items carefully. Someone had labeled the box. Someone had chosen exactly where to hide it. But whether that decision had been made to protect deeply personal memories, or simply because it had been overlooked during years of palace changes, remained impossible to determine." William listened carefully before giving a brief instruction. "I'd like this room secured. Only authorized staff would be allowed access until every item had been documented. No photographs would leave the room. No information would be shared outside the small team present." Everyone agreed immediately. The atmosphere had shifted from curiosity to responsibility. Finally, William looked down once more at the envelope resting in his hands. He carefully slipped a finger beneath the aged seal. The paper opened with barely a sound. He unfolded the first page. His eyes began moving slowly across the opening lines. Almost instantly, the expression on his face changed. Whatever his mother had written all those years ago was something no one else in the room had expected. And for a long moment, William simply stood there in complete silence. William remained motionless as he read the first lines of the letter. The room around him seemed to fade into the background. Although everyone present respected his privacy, they could not help noticing the sudden change in his expression. It was not one of shock alone. It was something quieter, something more reflective, as though the words on the page had transported him back many years. After several minutes, he folded the letter carefully and slipped it back into its envelope. He looked up at the archivists gathered around the table and thanked them for their patience. No one asked what the letter contained. It was obvious that whatever had been written was deeply personal. One of the senior archivists finally broke the silence. "Would you like us to continue documenting the remaining contents, sir?" William nodded. "Yes, every item deserves to be recorded properly." The team resumed their work, photographing each object before placing it on a clean linen cloth. Every photograph, note, and personal keepsake was handled with extraordinary care. Although this discovery was entirely unexpected, the atmosphere remained calm and professional. As the collection grew across the large examination table, the story told by the objects became increasingly personal. There were small notebooks containing brief reminders, handwritten lists of charitable organizations, and folded pieces of paper with simple observations about people Diana had met during official visits. None of the notes contained dramatic revelations. Instead, they reflected someone who paid close attention to individual lives and remembered small details long after public engagements had ended. Several photographs immediately caught William's attention. One showed a family picnic beneath large trees. Another appeared to capture a quiet afternoon in a palace garden. The photographs looked completely different from official portraits released to newspapers. No photographers were posing anyone. The smiles appeared natural and the setting felt relaxed. William picked up one picture that showed two young boys laughing as they chased each other across a lawn, while Diana watched from a nearby bench. He smiled. "I don't remember this day," he said quietly. One archivist explained that many personal family photographs were never developed for public use. Before the digital era, families often kept boxes of negatives and prints that were intended only for private albums. It was entirely possible that these images had never been seen outside a small circle of family members. Nearby lay the undeveloped rolls of camera film that had been discovered inside the wooden box. Their labels had faded almost completely, making it impossible to determine where or when they had been taken. The archivist discussed whether the film could still be processed after so many years. Advances in photographic restoration had successfully recovered images from damaged negatives before, although there were no guarantees. William considered the possibility for a moment. "If there's even a chance," he replied, "it's worth trying." Attention soon returned to the envelope. Although William chose not to reveal the full contents of the letter, he later shared that it had not contained political opinions, accusations, or hidden secrets. Instead, in this story, it was written as a message from a mother to her eldest son. The imagined letter spoke about kindness before duty. It encouraged William to remember that leadership was measured not only by tradition, but by compassion. It reminded him that titles could command respect, but genuine character had to be earned every day. The letter also spoke about family. It encouraged him never to lose sight of the importance of protecting those closest to him, even when public life demanded constant attention elsewhere. The final paragraph was especially moving. According to this account, Diana wrote that she hoped William would one day understand that even imperfect moments become treasured memories with the passing of time. Those words remained with him long after he folded the letter once more. As documentation continued, another archivist examined the inside walls of the wooden box itself. Years of experience had taught him that older storage containers occasionally included hidden compartments designed to protect fragile documents from moisture or accidental damage. Running his fingers gently along the interior base, he paused. "This feels uneven." The others gathered around, carefully lifting one corner of the felt lining. The archivist discovered that the bottom of the box was slightly thicker than expected. There appeared to be a second wooden panel beneath it. No one attempted to force it open. Instead, the entire box was moved into the Palace Conservation Laboratory, where specialist tools could examine the structure without damaging the wood. William remained nearby as conservators slowly removed several tiny brass pins securing the false base. The hidden compartment was remarkably shallow. Inside rested only 3 items. The first was a SLE, leather notebook. The second was a sealed packet of photographic negatives. The third was a small folded card bearing only one handwritten sentence. "For family memories." The room fell silent once again. Unlike the earlier envelope, this note contained no signature. There was no date. Nothing identified who had written it. The notebook itself contained short handwritten reflections rather than lengthy diary entries. Many pages described ordinary moments that would have seemed insignificant at the time they occurred. There were notes about rainy afternoons spent indoors, birthday celebrations, walks through palace gardens, and amusing conversations with young children. Reading them created an unexpected feeling. History often remembers famous people through major public events, speeches, and photographs. Yet these simple notes suggested that the moments held most closely were often the quietest ones. One page described watching clouds drift across the sky with the boys after a busy week of engagements. Another recalled laughter over burnt toast during breakfast. There were references to favorite books, favorite songs, and favorite places to escape from the cameras whenever possible. William smiled more than once while reading. "They're just normal memories," he said softly. One archivist nodded. "Sometimes those are the most valuable." Over the following days, specialists began comparing the newly discovered items against existing archive inventories. Thousands of records dating back decades were reviewed. Eventually, they found a single reference that seemed connected. It was an old storage ledger created during a palace reorganization many years earlier. One handwritten entry simply stated, "Private family container. Temporary placement." There was no destination listed, no room number, no explanation. It appeared the box had simply disappeared into storage during years of renovations and changing office arrangements. Whether it had been misplaced accidentally or intentionally set aside remained impossible to determine. Within this story, the mystery was never fully solved. News of the discovery was deliberately kept within a very small group. William believed the objects represented private family memories rather than historical exhibits. Although many people would undoubtedly have wanted to see them, he felt some things deserved to remain outside public attention. The photographs were carefully preserved. The notebook was placed inside climate-controlled archival storage. The undeveloped film was transferred to photographic specialists for restoration. The envelope addressed to William was returned to the wooden box. A few evenings later, William invited Catherine to view several of the family photographs. Together, they quietly looked through the images, smiling at moments neither had ever seen before. Some showed playful afternoons. Others captured quiet family gatherings. They imagined how fascinated George, Charlotte, and Louis might one day be to see such ordinary moments from the life of the grandmother they never had the chance to know. William carefully selected a handful of copies to share privately with his children when they were older. The originals remained safely protected. Several weeks later, the conservation work was complete. The wooden box, now fully restored, looked almost exactly as it had when workers first discovered it, hidden behind the forgotten cabinet. Every item had been cataloged for the first time. Every photograph had been preserved. Every page had been carefully protected. Before the box was returned to secure archival storage, William spent one final moment alone with it. He rested a hand gently on the lid. For a long time he said nothing. Then, almost in a whisper, he smiled and quietly said, "Thank you, Mum." The archivist respectfully stepped back as the lid was closed one final time. The brass catches clicked softly into place. The restored box disappeared once more into secure storage, but unlike before, its existence would never again be forgotten. As the lights were switched off inside the archive room, one conservator paused before leaving. He glanced back toward the shelves and smiled to himself. History, he reflected, is often shaped by great public events. But sometimes it is the smallest forgotten memories that leave the deepest impression. And somewhere inside that quiet room rested a simple wooden box that, in this story, reminded everyone that behind every famous life are ordinary moments that matter most.